This is Alpha transmitting from the Thor orbital transporter squad to move into the main complex of the Aztec camp. Be careful, sensors are picking up life forms that are non-human. The complex seems to have power and reading. This is Alpha have launched dropship from Thor and am now approaching Biosphere of Europa, experiencing turbulence. Should reach Aztec Mini Camp 03 in 10 minutes. Surface temperature reading -20. The camp surface is reading 3 centigrade. The power plant must be still working. The camp has a backup generator in the main complex. Level 3 will try and set can see cam outbuilding structures. Cement-tac electricity is working. No signal from them. Transmitter am going to circle the perimeter, picking up non-human life form all over the camp surface. Large numbers moving towards your positions. Advice: stay indoors and lock all outside windows and entrances.
The old miner whom we met when out in Colorado this summer says he can find it if we circle around in the dropship. So I'm going to take a chance. I'll tell you all about it. And while Tom is doing this, I will take the opportunity to more. The gold, it's true, though I haven't seen it. Jake Porter was telling me about it, and he's built a big shed in his yard, and he and some cronies of his, including Pete Bailey and Sam Snedeker, are working in there night and day. They've hired a couple of machinists, too. Mr. Foger is putting up the cash. Since earliest childhood I have been strangely fascinated by the mystery surrounding the history of the last days of 20th century Europe. My interest is keenest, perhaps not so much in relation to known facts as to speculation upon the unknowable of the 2 centuries that have rolled by since human intercourse between the Western and Eastern hemispheres ceased. The mystery of Europe's state following the termination of the Great War, provided, of course, that the war had and then I let my eyes drop once more to the face upon the water, and what I saw nearly tumbled me backward into the sea, for the eyes in the dead face had opened, the lips had parted, and one hand was raised toward me in a mute appeal for succor. She lived. She was not dead. I leaned over the boat's side and drew her quickly. Genesis was meant to teach scientific truth, and thus save the veracity of the record at the expense of its authority, or they expend their energies in devising the cruel ingenuities of the reconciler and torture texts in the vain hope of making them confess the creed of science. But when the pine for et dure is over, the antique sincerity of the venerable sufferer always reasserts itself. Genesis is honest to the core and professes to be no more than it is, until the facts of nature are shown to have been mistaken by those who have collected them, and that they have a different meaning from that now generally assigned to them. I shall therefore consider the transmutation theory as a scientific mistake, untrue in its facts, unscientific in its method, and mischievous in its tendency. Silliman's Journal, July. We had brought the sledges the day before to the starting point of the southern journey. At the beginning of September the temperature rose, and it was decided to commence the journey. On September 8 a party of 8 men set out, with 7 sledges and 90 dogs, provisioned for 90 days. The surface was excellent, and the temperature not so bad as it might have been. But on the following day we saw that we had started too early. The temperature then fell and remained for some days. The misleading significance of words. The people, on their part, may think that cognition is knowing all about things, but the philosopher must say to himself, when I analyze the process that is expressed in the sentence, I think, I find a whole series of daring assertions, the argumentative proof of which would be difficult, perhaps impossible. For instance, that it is I underline who think that there must necessarily be something that thinks that. Thinking is an activity in operation on the law, as quoted, lays down a fair conduct of life, and one not easy to follow. I have been fellow to a beggar again and again under circumstances which prevented either of us finding out whether the other was worthy. I have still to be brother to a prince, though I once came near to kinship with what might have been a veritable king and was promised the reversion of a kingdom, army, law, courts, revenue and policy, all complete. But today I greatly fear that my king is dead, and if I want a crown I must go and hunt it for myself. During the War of the Rebellion, a new and influential club was established in the city of Baltimore, in the state of Maryland. It is well known with what energy the taste for military matters became developed among that nation of ship owners, shopkeepers, and mechanics. Simple tradesmen jumped their counters to become extemporized captains, colonels, and generals without having ever passed the school of instruction at West Point. Nevertheless, they quickly rivaled their compeers of the old continent and but the point in which the Americans singularly distanced the Europeans was in the science of gunnery. Not, indeed, that their weapons retained a higher degree of perfection than theirs, but that they exhibited unheard of dimensions, and consequently attained hitherto unheard of ranges, in point of grazing, plunging, oblique, or enfilading, or point blank firing. The English, French, and Russians have nothing to learn, but their cannon, howitzers, and mortars are. This fact need surprise no one. The Yankees, the first mechanicians in the world, are engineers just as the Italians are musicians and the Germans metaphysicians by right of birth. Nothing is more natural, therefore, than to perceive them applying their audacious ingenuity to the science of gunnery. Witness the marvels of Parrott, Dahlgren, and Rodman. The Armstrong, Palliser, and Volue guns were compelled to bow before their transatlantic rivals.